All right. Pardon me as I take my little bite of my snack. Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to talk about joins, um, what they are, uh, how we write them, and then see, what they do, how we make them work. Okay, so we've looked over how to retrieve that. Matter of fact, we looked at the CRUD method. So how to create, how to retrieve, how to update, and how to delete. And we talked quite a deal about delete in particular, and being careful when we're doing that and looking for alternatives. Uh, but as we mentioned earlier, SQL is a relational database system. So the tables are built in such a way that they can connect to each other. And so what we can do is we can make queries that do include multiple tables. So far, with the queries that we've been writing, it's just been working with one particular table, whether it's from artist or album, band, etc. So now, how can we write queries from multiple tables? We'll write a single query that uses multiple tables. And the way we do that is with a join. So let's see how they work. Okay. So let's write this query here. Um, we're going to select the title, artist, year, well, the title, artist, and year released from the album table. So I'm going to come over here and let me move this up just a hair. I don't want my big head in the corner to interfere with anybody trying to learn. So I'm going to go ahead and locate well, let me pull up MySQL -u root -p and then enter my password. Okay, so now here I'm in my SQL server. If you forget those commands, you can go back a couple lessons, look at the slides to see how to start up your SQL server. Um, we're going to use my album DB. That's the one we're working on. Okay, cool. And the query was select title, artist ID, and year release from album. Okay, so I'm going to say select title, artist underscore ID, and year released from album. Select title, artist ID, year released from album. And when I do that, we get 13 rows. Okay. We can see that when the data is retrieved, it lists the artist ID. And if there's not one, well, it does that or it's null, and it doesn't return the name of the artist. Okay. Well, for the end user, when we're searching, we want to pull up data, what have you, it's not very helpful. We want to display the names of the artists who made the album as well. We know the names are listed in the artist table. So look here, and again, when I pull this up, notice that, excuse me, I get artist ID 2, no, 3, 4, etc. It's not really helpful because I can't see the actual name of the artist. And I will want to see the name of the artist. So, what can we do? This is where joins come in. What we need to do is we're going to join the artist table to the album table. And so let's write this query out. And for this query, I'm going to write this in MySQL. In Visual Studio Code. So let me pull up Visual Studio Code. And yeah, album 25 CD, album 25 DB. I'm gonna open up Visual Studio Code, and I'm gonna write this. I'm gonna write this query here inside of Visual Studio Code. Let me zoom in just a bit so that it's a little more readable. Okay, so we want to same information, the title, first name, last name, year release. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna say select. I want the title. I'm gonna say F name, L name, year released from album. So I'm gonna start here. Okay. Now here, there's gonna be an issue. Okay, because while I'm saying select title, first name, last name, year release from album, I myself, a human being, I understand what this is saying and where I'm going with this. However, I'm talking to the computer, and the computer is going to be looking for, or the SQL server is going to be looking for where this title is listed. Where's first name, last name, year release? And it's going to think, okay, well, let me look in album. But I know first name and last name are not inside of the album table. They're in the artist table. So what I have to do here is I have to specify which tables I'm going into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, instead of just title, I'm going to say album.title. The first name is an artist. I'm going to say artist.first name. Last name, same thing. Artist.last name. And then year released is in album.year released. So select album.title, meaning go into the album table, get the title field. Go into the artist table, get the first name field. Go into the artist table, get the last name field, and then go into the album table and get the year release field. From album, and then what I'm going to do here, this is where I use my join clause. So I'm going to say join artist on, where are we joining? Remember, in each table, we built constraints. And in those constraints, we set primary keys and foreign keys. And this is where they come into play, okay? Because what we want to do, let's look over here at our table here. So here in our album table, we're using artist ID. And we have established that artist ID is referencing the artist ID in the artist table. So they're one and the same, if you will. So with that being said, we can say join artist on, and here I will say album dot artist underscore ID is equal to artist dot artist ID. So album.title, artist.first name, artist.last name, album.year released. From the album table, join artist, the artist table, on album ID, album.artist ID is equal to artist.artist ID. So I'm going to copy this and pop that in my SQL server and hit enter. And now here's what we have. it returned 7 rows. We've got all of the album titles, not quite. Uh, and then we have the first name and last name and the year released for each album. Now, this is not quite what we want, and we're getting somewhere with this, okay? But you can see that it did kind of work. We have the title and we got the first name and last name for the artist. So now this is a little bit more understandable, okay? So I can say, hey, who released the album Mama's Gun? Who released Kinda Blue? So on and so forth, okay? And also note you can see, because I know Kinda Blue is 13, that's the ID that it has. But you see, since Miles Davis is an artist, has an artist ID of 3, it returned them in order of the artist ID, which is fine. That's okay. All right. And if we wanted to, we could say order by, again, the last name, order by the artist, the album ID, or what have you. But want to see how that works. Okay. So that's a good join. And this is the bones of the join. So we're selecting, you have to specify which table you're pulling from as well as the field. And the syntax for it is table.field. And I'm going to make a little comment right here. So we're going to say table.field. That is how you specify which fields you want. And you can do the same thing if you're not using a join. In other words, if I just want to select, year released, say, select album dot title, album dot year released from album. I can do that. That's perfectly fine. Okay. Matter of fact, that is what is happening underneath the hood. So it's doing this anyways. Okay. Where it's selecting the table dot field. All right. So that will work just fine. But you definitely have to do that when you are joining. Okay. And so what we did, we said from the album table, join the artist. Okay. Now, with this, we can shorthand this. Okay. Because sometimes writing the table names can get a little cumbersome. Okay. So we can clean this up a little bit. And what we're going to do is I'm going to say, matter of fact, I'm just going to paste that right there. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create aliases for my tables because sometimes I don't want to write out album or artist or, whatever other fields or whatever the tables are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say select AL title because it's from the album table. Artist, I'm just going to call that AR. So let me change that one as well. AR, that's going to be, again, AL. And then here, what I'm going to do, because I need to let MySQL know what that AL is representing and what that AR is representing. So all I have to do right here is say select from album, and I'm going to say put a space and say AL. And then here, I'm going to say join artist ID, and I'm going to say join artist AR. And just to show you that it still works, or should, I'm going to copy this and paste it, and I should get the same information. I did not, oh, that's right, because I didn't change this right here. So this needs to be on al.artist ID, and that should be ar.artist ID. There we go. I left that out. So wherever you have album, there it is. That's where it worked now. Okay. So there it is. So you see, wherever here we had album, we replaced it with an AL. Same thing with artist, because we're saying we're creating an alias saying, hey, AL, whenever I see AL, that's going to be album. Where I see AR, that's going to be artist. Okay. So we see here in the example, we see first notice that we use the aliases AL and AR for the album and artist table, as we have up here. Otherwise, we'd have to type album.title, artist.fname, etc. to specify which table we were retrieving from, which I just showed you. Okay. And the next thing we do, or we focus on, we're saying join artist AR. So we include join and on clause to connect the tables. And what we're doing, we're saying we want to join the artist table to the album table. And where we want to connect the two tables is where the album.artist ID field is equal to the artist.artist ID field. And this AL.artist ID is equal to AR.artist ID. That's called a subclause. Okay. So, in other words, in the album table, there is an AL. Well, I'm sorry, there is an artist ID of 3. And in the artist table, there is an artist ID of 3. And what MySQL is doing is saying, okay, let me look wherever 3 in 3, I'm going to where there's a 3 in the album table and a 3 in the artist table, I'm going to connect those two tables at that point. And yes, I see the question. AL is abbreviation for album, and AR abbreviation for artist. With the alias, you can set it to be whatever you want it to be. Like this doesn't have to be, AL. I can make that A and make this B if I want to, but that's not very readable, right? Because the B doesn't really represent anything, so I wouldn't do that. But yes, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, the 3 from the 3 in the album table and 3 in the artist tables, where these two tables are going to meet, and whatever data I have in there, I'm going to connect them at that point. So if in the subclause the names of the columns are the same as in our example, where we have al.artist ID and ar.artist ID, we can replace them by using the using clause and entering the name of the columns inside parentheses. So in other words, this is another way to shorten this up some more. So I can say here, select al.title, ar.fname, ar.lname, al.year released from the album table. And instead of having this join artist AR on al.artist ID equals ar.artist ID, what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase that right there. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to say join artist AR, excuse me, and then I'm going to say using. So using, and then inside parentheses, I can say artist underscore ID. That should work. Matter of fact, let me put that on the same line, because I know I do like those to be on the same line. Let's see if this works. I'm going to copy this and paste it, and it does work. Yes. So sometimes you want to make it a little shorter. I know I like to do that. And you can do this when the when the field names are the same. Now, if the field names are not the same, then you will not be able to do that. But since we wrote it so where there's an artist ID in album and an artist ID in artist, since those names are the same, we can use the using clause to shorten it up. And that's kind of why we write why you want to be mindful, if you will, on how you're building out your schema and your naming conventions. Some people like to just throw whatever kind of names or names that don't have any meaning to their fields, and much, far outside of SQL, just anywhere, just write names that don't mean something. And when you do that, you put yourself in a position where you have to work a little harder. Um, and so, most developers, you know, I don't like to say we because I don't necessarily consider myself a part of that, but developers like to be lazy, or just not like to be, but they are lazy. And so, because what that has afforded them to do in their laziness is come up with ways schematically to write things that the work doesn't get compromised in their laziness. Subclause abbreviation when using join. I don't understand what you mean, Destiny. What do you mean by that? Okay. Oh, there you are. What do you mean by that? Okay. No, a subclause is just a clause inside of another clause. That's all that is. The abbreviation is simply to kind of shorten it up for us, because maybe I don't want to write album dot title, artist dot first name, artist dot last name. Maybe I want to shorten it up. I can do that by using the abbreviations. That's all. Or, excuse me, not a, we call it alias. That's the correct term. Um, and they ask you a question. Um, yeah, we can put column names from both tables in the select. Exactly. Whatever it is that we want to select, doesn't matter which table it's in, all that goes in the select clause. And we're going to explore that a little more. Okay. But remember, or you can see here again, that um, if the name of the field or column is the same for both tables or however many tables, we can use using and then in parentheses just the name of the table, or the column, rather, name of the column, as opposed to saying on table dot field is equal to table dot field. So it just makes it a little easier for us to read. Um, so let's move right along. We can see that this particular type of join is called an inner join. There are other types of joins as well, such as an outer join and left, was it left outer join, and all of the kind of stuff. By default, SQL will default to inner joins, meaning that we don't have to specify the type of join by saying inner join. So if we just say join, SQL is going to understand that to be an inner join. When we join the tables together, we can see that it did not capture all the albums. And that's what I wanted to get to. We're missing the albums that do not have an individual artist, but are rather composed of a band. So again, when we come back here and look, when we list all the albums, there are 13 of them. But when I say, hey, when I do my join, it only listed the albums that are also that have artist IDs, and it left out the ones with a band ID. So how can we correct this so that all the albums in the field are listed? Here is where we're going to use an outer join, specifically a left outer join. And what this does, this left outer join, what it does is it's going to take here three tables. Okay, we'll have the table that we're pulling from, say the album table, and then we have a artist table and we have a band table. And what the outer join is going to do, or the left outer join for that matter, is going to say, hey, album, look over here in the artist table. And if there's information there that we need, get that. And then look over here in the band table and see if there's information that we need from there. And if so, get that. And then it will connect them all. So let's do that. Again, I'm going to write that here in Visual Studio Code. So I want to select, I want the AL dot title. I want the AR dot F name. Give me the AR dot L name. And then I want B dot band because I want to get the band name. And then I'm going to say AL dot year released. I see a question. I'll be just a second. We want to get that from the album table. So I'll say album AL, not algorithm. That's ridiculous. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say left outer join. So I need to specify right here. So I'm going to say left outer join artist. And I like to use the on right here. I'm going to say artist AR on. And I'm going to say AL dot artist underscore ID is equal to AR dot artist underscore ID. And then left outer join band B, again on AL dot band underscore ID is equal to B dot band underscore ID. Day, you had a question? Correct. Right here. Yes. And what I think, and I may be wrong, but I think what it does in this instance is it kind of works its way up, if you will. So it's like it does that stuff down at the bottom and builds up to like the select. So it's like it cooks everything and then presents the meal in the select, if you will. Correct. Correct. Yeah. And again, if I didn't want to, I can just type out album, artist, band, album if I want to do that. Some people like to do that because obviously it's very clear what what it represents. Okay. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. Let's copy this and paste it and see. You're welcome. And there it is. It worked. Um, and it returned all of the albums now. And this time it's got the first name, last name, and the band. And notice that if there is no band, it comes back null. Likewise, if there's no first name or last name, it comes back null. So here we go. You can see there's the query there. So you see these queries can quickly become very complex, but you need to understand this if you want to return the data in a certain way. When we use an outer join, the left side of the join, the album table, is specifying which table to look at on the right side of the join, artist or band, based on either the artist ID or the band ID. So the album table, that's on the left side of the join. And on the right side of the join, we have two tables. We have artist and band. And so it's looking at both of them. Now you should be able to see that every album is listed with the first name, last name, and band data listed as well. And while it's an improvement, it's still not exactly what we want. So let's clean this up by removing the null values. Okay, and this is where, whoo, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use cases. Similar to a switch statement in JavaScript. If you've done JavaScript, you'll kind of understand that. We can create cases that will look at the data and determine what to do in a particular case. So we will rewrite the query. Actually, rewrite the query. So in other words, what's going to happen is in this next query that we're going to write, we're going to create a case that says, hey, what to do if the data is null? For all three of those fields. So first name, if the data is null, last name, band, etc. If they're null, what do we do? And then we're going to return the data. So the case, and I know this is like very small, you need to be looking at the slides if you're just trying to copy this down. But if you're watching on YouTube, I mean, it should be legible. But this is what it looks like, okay? We're going to say select the title, okay? And we just know we're just pulling the title. There's nothing to worry about there. And then we write a case. And in the case, we're going to say, hey, when this field is null, then what do we do? Else, or in other words, if it's not null, then we'll return this thing. And then we have to end it. And then we have to do another case. Same thing. Going through it. Let me see this question. So is left a direction or like left out? No, it's like a direction. So Ashley, what we have here when we're joining, we have a left side of a join and a right side of a join. Okay. It's not quite like an equation in mathematics, but something, if you think about it in that way, maybe it makes sense. We have like a left side of an equal sign and right side of equal sign. But you have a left side of join, right side of the join. And so we stated that the album table is the left side of the join. Okay. And what it does is it's looking on this right side, on the right side, and there's artist and band. And if there's data that we can get from the artist table, join that to the album table, and then same thing, band, if there's data that we can get, join that to the album table, and then return uh, the fields. Is case similar to elif? Yes, kind of, sort of. I say it's closer to a switch case than it is else if. I mean, obviously we see the language else right there, but where it's more like a switch statement is that in like a switch statement, you have to have a break at the end of each case, just like you have to end the case here. All right, so let's do that. All right. So I'm going to say, hey, if the data is null, then what I want to do is just create an empty string. Okay. So I'm going to say select al.title. I know I want that. Put a comma. And I'm going to say case when the ar.f name is null, then make an empty string. I forget. Do I put? I don't. Else, what are we going to do? So if it's not null, then what we're going to do is we're just going to return sorry, ar, yeah, dot f name, and then we're going to say end f name. Put a comma. I like these to be over there like so. Yeah, that's how I like mine to look. I say case when ar.l name is null, then same thing, empty string. Else ar.l name. So if it's not empty, return the last name and then end l name. Make sure you put a comma. Then I'm going to say case when b.band is null, then empty string, else b.band end band, comma, and then let me not forget the year. Well, that'd be al.year released, and then the rest is kind of what we did before. So from rather. So from album al, not algorithm. That's just ridiculous. Left outer join artist ar on al.artist id is equal to ar.artist id. Left outer join band b on al.band id is equal to b.band id. And that's it. This should work. So now copy this and paste it. There it is. So now you can see we removed all the null entries. And if the data is null, then we don't put anything there. We leave it blank, if you will. It's an empty string. Otherwise, we return the data. And I think this is a little more readable than this here. That's what I think. Now, as we get into, go further and get into building out APIs, we could do that inside the API instead of doing it here in MySQL, where we can say, hey, once we collect all the data, if this particular property is null, then don't do anything. Otherwise, return the data. So that's something we could do. All right. So yeah, that's a lot. I know. Got to practice with that some more. We'll do another one perhaps. But what that did was it replaced the null value with an empty string. Now results look a little cleaner. We don't have to read through the null values when looking at the data. All right. You can see, believe it or not, our queries can get a lot more complex. Yes, they can. But if you use these techniques correctly, you'll be much better at retrieving data. There's a whole lot more to SQL. I know this is come to the end of the slides. If you practice the concepts that were covered here, you're on your way to becoming great at relational database management. You should build databases from scratch and practice accessing the data in different ways to get a better grasp of SQL. And always remember, as I say, practice makes better. So, yeah, at the end of the slides, there's some terminology in there, uh, some stuff that you may find helpful if you don't understand exactly what these terms mean when I speak them. There's some a little glossary, if you will, on the end of it. But so that's it with these slides. Okay, we're just gonna do some more work with this. Okay, so I recommend practice, practice, practice. Start from scratch. It doesn't have to be, this extremely large database that you build. Okay, but practice writing schema for a few tables. Enter little bits of data in there, and then just practice writing queries that will retrieve the data in a certain way. Okay, that's how you get better at this. Maybe not great, because who amongst us is great, right? And even the great ones can always stand to be a little better, but you'll get better than you were the day before, and that's what's most important. So see you on the other side of this video.